Aloha and welcome to the part 2 of Dynamic Web Applications, second WOD. This is called DigitsSelection. And we're going to depart from just the simple text fields for our form control, and we're going to look at a more complicated form control, which is a pull-down menu or a selection form control. And what we're going to do is we're going to add this telephone type to our form, which can take on the value home, work, or mobile. And we want to store that with our contacts and retrieve it. And so that when we display a previously saved contact, telephone type will be set to whatever they had last time. Okay? And so there's a few different steps you have to go through in order to do this. And let's see how it works. Okay, so we're going to start by creating a new branch off of the last WOD, named DigitsSelection 1. So we'll go plus DigitsSelection 1 for our first attempt. Create the branch. Let's see if we've got the branch. Okay, we're there. And just to make sure that everything is copacetic, we'll do our clean compile run. And then if we go to localhost 9000, we get this. And we can see it all looks good. If we were to go into our views package, we look at new contact, and it's got our nice text forms from last time. Okay, so let's go through the steps. Oh, we got to enable check style, which I think is already enabled, but we'll just make sure. And we're going to use the @select template. So we're going to copy the select scala.html file into our views.bootstrap3. So here's the select scala template. And then we're going to say save as, and we're going to put it into digits app views bootstrap 3. Okay, so now we see it's in here. That's good. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our actual form, new Scala. And we want to put this @select template in our form so that it happens right after the telephone. Okay, so the easiest way to do that is let's look at an example of that select form. And in the play example form, the good example is this GPA, because it's not a multiple select form. One of the things you need to realize about this select template is it handles both single selection lists where you can only select one element, as well as multi-selection lists, and that's controlled by this isMultiple Boolean value. So anyway, we're going to copy this, and we're going to put it in here in some good place, like that. And now let's modify it. So we're going to say, it says student form. Of course, this is going to be contact form. And the field is going to be called telephone type. The label is going to be telephone type. The option is going to be telephone type map. isMultiple is false, is true, and then we're not going to have any help. We're not helping our users. Who needs help, right? They should be able to figure it out by themselves. That's called usability. That's called user hostile programming. Okay, so we've got our select clause in here called telephone type, and the huge thing to note here is that we're going to need this new data structure. That data structure is going to be a map that takes strings to Booleans. The strings in this map are going to be all of the legal telephone types, and there'll be 3 of them: home, work, and mobile. And then the Boolean, there's going to be exactly one of those that's going to be for which the Boolean value will be true, and that's going to indicate which one of these selects are actually selected. Okay, that's how that works. So when we're presenting a user we're going to pass it a map where one of those things is set to true, and then the form will actually display that true value. And then when we're submitting a form, we're going to get a map that's got the item that was selected by the user set to true. So that's how we communicate back and forth. All right? So that's what that is, but now what we have to do is actually add this to our parameter list. So we'll say telephone, this is going to match up, right? Telephone type map, colon, and then we say map, and we use Scala syntax here, string, Boolean, okay? So, you know, just use the square braces rather than the angled braces for that. So it's going to be a map that takes strings to Booleans, telephone type map. Okay, of type map string Boolean. Okay, so that all looks good, and so now we've got our form, okay? It's not going to work in the slightest because now we've got to build in all the back-end infrastructure to make that work. So the next thing we have to do is we've got to somehow represent what our legal telephone types are. And the way we're going to do that is in our form data package, let's create something called, let's create a Java class called telephone types. Okay. And this represents the legal telephone types. And the way I'm going to do this, well, we need a few different kinds of, we need three methods: a get types that takes a string, and an is type. Okay, and I'll just show you the way I'm going to decide to do this. I'm going to say private string array types equals home, work, and mobile. Okay, so that's going to both create a string array and initialize its contents, and then we're going to use that to create our maps when we need them. So the next thing we need is a public static map string Boolean types. Okay, so this method is supposed to return basically our list, or a map that has a list of all acceptable telephone types where the value is always going to be false. So let's make one of these. So we got to create one of these, and the way we'll do it is we'll say map string Boolean type map equals new hash map. Okay, and then let's get everything imported that needs to be imported. And we'll say returns a newly initialized map of telephone types, the telephone type map. Okay, and then oh, it doesn't like this. Oh, it's not the right thing. We call it get types, right? Yeah, get types. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to say for string type in types. We're going to initialize it, type map dot put type false. Okay, and then once we're out of that for loop, we can say return type map. Okay, and it doesn't like for string private. Oh, sorry, this has got to be static. Okay. Next thing, so that's the get types, which is going to basically do our initialized map where no type is selected. The next one, and I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of copy this, is to create one that takes a string, tel type, param tel type, the telephone type. I forgot to start the timer. Shit. Sorry. What should we do? Add 3 minutes? I don't even know. I think it's probably been 3 minutes. 9:43 a.m. Have it. I'm so frustrated. So that's 12:14. Well, let's add I don't know. Let's add 5 minutes. I don't know what else to do. Shoots. Okay. Anyway, back to work. Okay. So telephone type to telephone type, and what we'll do is, given that telephone type, we create our initial list. And how do I want to do this? Returns a map of telephone types with the past tel type set to true. Well, what we could do is we could say type map equals telephone types dot get types. That returns our initialized one, and then we could say type, assuming that that's a legal one, we could say type map dot put tel type true. And I guess we'll just do it that way for now. So this is going to say assumes that tel type is a legal telephone type, which is presumably, we can guarantee that through validation. We could put a check in here, to make sure that it's one of the valid types and so forth. And in fact, we got to write this statement next. So we have to say public, or I have to write this function next, is type string tel type. And then we say return telephone, how do we want to do this? Telephone types dot get types dot key set dot contains tel type. Okay, so that's the way we can check public static Boolean returns true if tel type is a valid telephone type. The potential telephone type true if a valid telephone type, false otherwise. Okay, this isn't the most like high performance thing. We're creating things that we throw away, but at the same time, it's also not a whole lot of code to get this thing going. Okay, so now we have this little data structure called telephone types that establishes what the legal ones are, and we can build maps that that hopefully do the right thing. Yeah, okay. All right. So that's our representation. Okay. So now we're going to add telephone types to the form and model classes. So what we want to have here is the telephone type, public string telephone telephone type equals nothing. And then when we create unfortunately, this doesn't exist yet, but we'll create it. And then we'll go to contact, which is in our models class. And we'll make one of these things here. So we'll add a string telephone type. We'll say at param telephone type, telephone type, this dot telephone. You know, this is what people always hate about Java, is that there just seems to be a lot of boilerplate code. And, you know, I mean, to some extent, they're right. There is a lot of boilerplate code. You know, but you know, in some sense, you get something for it. All of the compile time safety, a lot of people don't think that matters. I think when you are doing web app programming with Play and you get all these compiler errors because your route doesn't match up with your controller doesn't match up with your view, you actually start to really enjoy getting these errors at compile time because it does create this kind of consistency. Now the Scala people will say, you know, you can get all that consistency without having to pay for all this template stuff, and so you know, it isn't necessarily coupled together. But you know, what we know about right now is Java, so we're going to use that, and we're going to pay a little bit with respect to you know, the verbosity. Okay, I don't know how else to say it other than that. Okay, so we had to update our contact DB because to make everything look right. So add contact now adds a telephone type. Let's look at our contact. We've got a contact, takes a telephone type. We've got getters and setters. And then if we look at contact form data, we've got a telephone type. We add that there. Okay, and then we've got this validation, which we need to fix. Okay, so we want to make sure that the form that someone submits an HTTP post, we want to make sure they submit it with the correct telephone type. Here's the key thing you have to understand is just because you've got a form like this that's going to only provide 3 options, that doesn't mean somebody else can't construct a post request that passes a different value. Okay? So the mere fact that the user interface that you construct doesn't allow for a different value does not mean on the server side people couldn't be hitting that server with something they've constructed which has a different value. So you always have to do validation of your values. So what we're going to say here is if telephone type, what do we want to say? Actually, we want to say if, no, we don't want to say that. We want to say telephone types dot is type okay, and then we say if it's not, so if it's not a valid telephone type, then we want to add an error. It's going to be to the telephone type field, telephone type must be home, work, or mobile. And again, it would be better if we kind of inquired of the telephone type abstract data type what the 3 valid ones are, and then put them there. In fact, what we should maybe do is say telephone type. We could just say this: telephone type is invalid, and then we're not duplicating information anywhere. There's a loss of a little bit of information, but heck, okay. So there's our check for the telephone type. Let's go back to see validation. Now process telephone types in controller. Okay, so in here, what you notice is that we are passing to the new contact template formed only one argument, form data. But if we look at the new contact template, we now have two parameters. So we need to be passing a telephone type map every time we invoke the new contact in our controller. So let's go through and look and see. Okay, here's where we want to actually pass telephone type map. Okay, so we want to pass one of those things, but we got to create one. Okay, so the question is, when we're displaying a pre-existing contact, which is or we've got some data in this contact form data, what we want to do is create a map string to Boolean called telephone type map equals telephone types dot get types, and what we want to pass in is whatever the value of telephone type is from this data. So data dot telephone type. Okay, and what I realized from this, okay, is that we need an import. Okay, and also I'm realizing that this here, data.telephone type, might not be a legal telephone type. It might be the empty string in the case of an empty form. Okay, so how are we going to deal with that? I think the way that we should deal with that is go to back to our telephone types. Okay, and what we want to say is if is type tel type type map.put. Okay, so if this is not a valid telephone type, then we don't add it to our map. Okay, so let's go back to application. So now this should, this should work hopefully pretty good. We'll find out. And this render form has to be compiled in Scala in order to show the right thing. So we won't worry about that error quite yet. Okay, this next thing is we need to pass telephone type map to this one. And the question is, what should that look like? And in the case of a bad thing, we're just going to create an empty telephone type map because we don't know what the right one should look like. So we'll create map of string to Boolean telephone type map equals telephone types dot get types. Okay, so we're just going to construct a blank one, and we're going to pass that in. The last place we refer to new contact is here, and so let's put telephone type map right there. And again, we need to get the telephone type map from there. So what we should do is say map string Boolean telephone type map equals telephone types dot get types. Darn it. Whoops. Yikes. Get types, and then we're going to say data dot telephone type. Okay, now the question is, in this case, because we know that this is a valid form, we know that data.telephone type is going to be a valid telephone type in this case. All right, so let's get out of this and just go compile and see what happens. Okay, so we have an error. This is actually an interesting error. It turns out that the helper package, okay, so we go to a new contact. We've got to import helper, import bootstrap 3. The helper package contains a template called select.scala.html, and we are defining our own select.scala.html in this package. So there's a couple ways out of this. And so this is what this compiler error is saying. We're importing it twice. And so what it turns out that there's not a helper called text for some reason. So what we can do to fix this is just say bootstrap3.select and explicitly state which selector we're using. We could also rename that template to something that doesn't conflict, but I couldn't think of a good name right off the bat. So I think we'll just disambiguate it this way for now, and let's compile and see what kinds of errors we get now. Oh, we didn't get any errors, so let's do a run. And we'll go to digits. Okay, we've got our new contact. We go here, and we can see we've now got telephone type, but let's pass in the rest. One, and a mobile, we'll say add, okay, and then we'll go back and we'll realize that in fact we're not displaying the telephone type because we didn't finish. We have to update the contact listing. So let's go back to digits, which we should now be able to refresh, okay. And we go into our index, and it should be a pretty simple matter. We're going to just add a column, th, telephone, we'll just call it type. And then we have a new, in each row, we'll say get telephone type, okay. And then let's go back here and reload, which will refresh. Now we have type appearing in this. We say new contact, Philip Johnson, and then let's go 1. And let's not do this telephone type just to see our error handling. And awesome, so our validation worked. We have to select a value, so we'll go select work this time. Click add, go back to home. And type is not displayed. Well, that's super irritating. So let's figure out why that happened. Okay, so in our new contact form telephone type map. Okay, so that all looks good. In our controller, okay, we get the data. And we get types data.telephone type. And then in contact, there it is. Okay. And you can see that now. Look, that's the wrong value. Okay. So let's now recompile. Okay, go to new contact. Go Philip Johnson 1. Please select a value. Work. Add, go to here, now it displays, go to edit, work shows up, and looks like we're good. Here's an illegal value. We can change Philip to mobile this time, submit it, go back to home, now it displays mobile, and I think we're done. Okay, so I didn't do the, what's wrong with me today? Okay, 12:42, I think I started about, I'm going to just say this is 20 minutes, feels like about a 20-minute WOD to me, and and we'll call it that. If you guys end up spending a lot longer on it. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'll look at the YouTube video. That'll tell me how long this was, and then I'll put the accurate amount in. Okay, I guess the last thing we should do is tend to what? Commit the working code to the branch. So added a telephone type to form. Commit and sync. Okay, and then I'll look on YouTube, figure out how long it took this WOD, and hope you enjoyed it. A lot of pieces, right, that you got to deal with to add one of these things. You're adding a representation for what a telephone type actually means. You're adding validation. You're updating your backing form. You're updating your model. So there's a lot of kind of connections. But hopefully you'll see that all the connections are important to make, and that it's really pretty straightforward. The key thing is, of course, understanding what this map object is and why it is, right? So this map object is both telling us what are the set of legal telephone types and which one should be displayed, if any. Once you get that, the rest of it just kind of falls out. All right, thanks a lot.